Right. Gospel Outreach. It's an organization that is located right here in College Place, and the function of Gospel Outreach is to gather funds and then to contract with the local church organizations, and primarily in the 1040 window, to sponsor X number of local people that will go out into unentered areas and raise up a church. So the donations go out there because the people here in Walla Walla are all volunteers. There are, I think, 17 different regions with a regional director that goes out once a year, but those regional directors receive no stipend either. They're volunteers. Their transportation is paid. But other than that, there's really no personal gain to work for Gospel Outreach, other than that you have the satisfaction that you're helping to tell people about Jesus. We have work in 51 different countries, and I understand there are over 2,000 workers that we're sponsoring. So there's a lot of missionaries out there that are being sponsored by the funds that are coming in this way. 1040 window. Many people don't understand what the 1040 window is. It's 10 degrees north latitude to 40 degrees north latitude, spreading from West Africa to Philippines and Japan. Within that area, 2/3 of the world population lives, because you have the big countries of India and China, each with well over 1 billion people each. So say 2/3 of the world's population. Of those people in that area, 2% are Christians of any kind. Christians of any kind. This is the home of Jewish religion, of Islam, of Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Jainism, Zoroastrianism. Many different major religions began in this area, because this includes the Middle East, Jerusalem. So it's a very strategic part of the world for Christians to be working, and for the most part, there's very little Christian work there. But that's the focus of Gospel Outreach. My work has been in the Philippines. The Philippines is located on the eastern end of the 1040 window, and is, it's just straight east of Vietnam, south of China, and north of Indonesia and the island of Borneo. Most of the people in the Philippines are Catholic. That is the most common religion. There are, I'm sorry, my phone is going off. I got to turn it off. It's predominantly Catholic, but there are other large groups as well, especially Muslims. In the island of Mindanao especially, there is an autonomous region that is Muslim. They would like to be a separate country. They would like to secede from the Philippines. So far, they haven't been able to do that. Most of the mainline Protestant churches are represented there. The largest of these would be the Iglesia de Cristo, which is a local church, primarily in the Philippines. There are a few of these churches now in North America. Now, if you translate that, it's Church of God, or Church of Christ, but it has no connection with the Church of Christ here in the United States. It's a Filipino organization, and it's recognized in the country by their particular architecture of their church. And believe it or not, their day of worship is Thursday. So you can imagine the problems of an employer who is required by law to allow people to have their day of worship off work. Iglesia de Cristo on Thursday, Muslims on Friday, Adventists on Sabbath, and the rest of them on Sunday. So that only leaves you 3 days a week to work, unless you have a broad scope of employees. Philippines is made up of 7,107 islands, with the big island of Luzon in the north, and they have a big island of Mindanao in the south, with the Visayas in between. Now that sounds like a lot of islands. Indonesia, just south of us, has 13,000 islands, so more than twice. Philippines was ruled by Spain for 350 years, so much of their language and culture is derived from the Spanish. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, it became a protectorate of the United States and remained so through World War II, which was very auspicious for the Filipinos. Otherwise, they'd be speaking Japanese now, because Manila was attacked within the same 24-hour period, but it was the next day after Pearl Harbor. So the war was fought there, and just as a sideline, General MacArthur, was very eager to win that war because the people in charge of the Philippines were his childhood playmates. He'd grown up in the Philippines. Gospel Outreach has about 75 workers there, ranging from the north to the south. And we're going to start in the far south in Mindanao, in the Davao area. We went to a remote village out on a precarious ridge of mountains. Some places, it was the road on the top of the ridge and falling off on both sides quite steeply. Then at the end of the road, we went down into this little valley, and it truly was the end of the road. There was no farther to go, and the last little stretch had just been built by a bulldozer not too long before. The bulldozer was still sitting there. I took this picture from the village in which we went from where the pickup is parked as far as we could go. Then we had to hike down a little bit farther, cross a stream, and back up the other side to get to this village. And when we got there, this is the place of worship where the villagers came to meet. This was one of our gospel outreach workers there. They tend to work in primitive areas because those are the areas that are unreached by Christianity. The area we were working in was the Tiboli, and these are many of these ladies are dressed in their native costume. Very beautiful, colorful, and for their basic religion is animism, which means they worship ancestors, they worship rocks, they worship trees, they worship water. They think that these various items are things that they must worship in order to appease God. Now, it rained the whole time we were there in this village. And so when we went back to the pickup, four-wheel drive pickup, and started to leave to come back to Davao, we didn't get very far. We went just a little ways, and a four-wheel drive spun out and started going sideways, and we backed down to the bottom of the hill again, made another run at it, and again we spun out, couldn't go any farther, and we began to pray. Lord, send some angels, pull us up this hill. Otherwise, we'll be here for a long time. And the Lord answered our prayer with about 30 angels and a bunch of rope. They grabbed a hold of that rope, and yes, they pulled us up the hill. But it was a long hill, and we had to stop and rest once in a while. But then they would say, okay, we're ready, and away we'd go again, spinning and sliding back and forth on the road, but we were making progress. There are a number of deaf people in the Philippines. I'm going to hand my phone to my wife. I think it's an important call. Sorry about that. But this is from our next door neighbor at home, and there might be some reason. It's coming back through my headphone, my hearing aids. Arlene, you change the speaker. Put it on speakerphone.
He's hung up by now.
Okay. Sorry. There are a number of deaf workers there in the Philippines. It's still coming through my. Maybe she got it now. These deaf are scattered in civilized areas as well as out in the mountains among the tribal people. We have developed a school for the deaf. Gospel Outreach assisted in developing this, and we've been operating there for several years now. These students will come in knowing no English, knowing no sign language, not knowing how to read or write. They really come in knowing nothing. And so we begin to teach them how to read and how to write and how to sign so they can communicate. Actually, we have to teach them how to sign first, and then we can talk with them and teach them the things they need to know. As I said, the school has been functioning for some time now. The girl on the right that you see there, second from the right hand on the picture, has been at the school for a number of years and has finished now her elementary school level and is beginning to start high school. She has gone to, she's going to continue to live on the campus of the Deaf School for the Deaf, but she'll be taking high school classes under a high school that we also operate in, under SULADS. I will tell you a little more about SULADS later on. But she's actually staying on the campus. But this was the team that welcomed us to the campus. Now, on this tour, I was accompanied by my replacement, because this was my last trip to the Philippines. My replacement, David Streifling. And this was the welcoming team that welcomed us when we arrived at the school. They have a farm, and they raise a good share of their own food. It's been a drought this year in Mindanao, so they've had a little trouble finding enough water to keep their plants growing. But this is some of the produce that they've had. When I was there last year, they put up a whole meal, all from their own land. And it was a big meal and delicious. Something that you don't see in this picture, between where I was standing and the table of all the food, was a big pile of corn. That's a common crop there. They grind it for cornmeal and use it. You know, if they can't afford to buy rice, they use cornmeal. They call that poor man's rice. Now, you may notice a symbol there that the deaf use. Some people misinterpret that as a demonic sign, but it's really not. It means I love you. That is three different things. I, this is a sign for I, L for love, and you is Y. That's Y. So when they do it like this, it's I love you. So if you see this symbol again, don't necessarily think it's demonic. Some people take offense at that. I've had people write me on email and say, hey, why do you use a demonic symbol? Because when they have their picture taken, they like to flash that sign. While we were there, they put on a skit for us. It was a silent skit depicting the birth of Jesus. You notice the angels in the background there. You notice the shepherds and their sheep that are down on all fours. And then the three kings. And of course, Mary with the baby Jesus on her lap. All silent, of course, because they don't speak. They do special music. Would you believe? They do special music. But what they do is they have someone that hears sing, and then there's an interpreter that signs to them, and they join in with signing. So while the one is singing, you hear the words, you see them signing the same words. I don't understand signs, so it's I don't get that, but it's a joy to watch. At one point, someone allowed them to use some what they call angklang. It's a instrument made out of bamboo that you play similar to bells, where each person has one note that they play, and by different sequence of individuals playing their notes, they make music. And it just touched me. Here was a group of deaf people making music that I could hear, and they couldn't hear it. But it was beautiful. And then they put on a cultural dance for us. That's very typical in the Philippines, a lot of cultural dances. Not the kind of dances we have here, but cultural dances. This David Streifling there with me on the right. To my left in the picture is a family, a mother, a father, a daughter, and a son, all deaf. So they're all at the same level of education. The mother and father and the children are all at the same level of education, learning to sign, learning to read, and learning to write. They came to the school. Now the school doesn't charge tuition because the people that come couldn't afford to pay. So there's no tuition, but the father and the mother in this case are both working there at the school to help defray the expenses. They put on a big meal for us, a long table. And as I looked at that long table, I thought of another long table that I'm looking forward to sitting at one day when Jesus takes us home and we can sit at the long table that we're told is a mile long, and we can see and hear the whole distance. As we were preparing to leave, they asked the two of us to stand in a circle, and they surrounded us and had a prayer dedicating us to God's care and to protect us as we were to travel. And it was basically a farewell for me because they knew I wasn't coming back. So they were praying for our safety. Now we're up in the northern part of Luzon. We're up in the northern part of the Philippines. Now you see that wall behind there, and you see that's a jeepney. That green thing is a jeepney. That's the public transportation method. In fact, there's the rear end of one there on the right-hand side below. But I took this picture to indicate how steep the roads are. And by the way, it's very narrow. Getting back in there, I don't see how they make these jeepneys to come around those corners, but it was there. Very steep. They build houses almost right on top of another and stack them up as they go up the hill. But we had a church there, and we were there to go to church. Here's the church up on top of a hill. Now, in order to get from where I was standing on a steep road when I took this picture, in order to get up to the church, we had to climb up some very steep stairs. Concrete steps that had been poured into the wall, into the mountainside, and those steps were about that high each. And it's a 5,000 feet elevation, so you're kind of out of breath a little bit. I had to stop and catch my breath a couple of times to get up there, but when you get to the top, this was the view, looking out over a valley below. Now, in years past, that valley was a rich agricultural area, but it's all been built over with houses now. It's a fantastic view, but very, very few of these people know the Jesus that we know. And so we're working to try to win them for our Lord and Savior. This is a place where we have worship. It is the worship is actually on the ground floor which is below, and you can't see it here. So here I'm looking down on the ground floor of that same building, and this is our gospel outreach worker in that area. He's raised up a small group that meets every Sabbath and are beginning to accept Jesus. One of those was this lady in the center of the picture. This is the lady on the left is the wife of our gospel outreach worker, is really part of the team. Lily, there in the center, was born and raised as a Catholic. She felt it really did not meet her needs. So she didn't know what else to do. She remained a Catholic. She grew up, married, had 3 sons, and when her sons were very young, I think the oldest one was about 5 or 6, her husband was killed in a mining accident. He was a miner. So she was a single mom raising her children. The man on the right is now her current husband, but that was after her children were raised. She was not happy with her religion, so she began to cast around for where she might find satisfaction. And she found the Jehovah's Witnesses. And she joined them, but as she learned more and more about them, she realized that it wasn't meeting her needs. So she kept looking. About a year ago from right now, and we were there in March, about a year ago from right now, our gospel outreach worker came to that area. And as they went around visiting the different homes, hers was one of the homes they visited. And she wanted to learn more. And so they studied the Bible with her, and very quickly, it didn't take her very long to realize this was what she had been looking for all her life. So she decided to become a Seventh-day Adventist, and she now rejoices, but she is burdened. Her 3 sons are not interested. And she said, if only I had taught them the right thing. And she was blaming herself for doing a poor job of raising her sons because they don't know about the Jesus that she now knows. So we had to tell her, you did the best you knew how. And you keep living your life before them, showing them the love of Jesus, and one day maybe they will accept. Now we're back in Mindanao. These are the workers in the northeastern Mindanao area. And as we walked into the office, they had this poster up there welcoming Dr. Streifling and myself. And those are our gospel outreach workers up on the balcony. And they were singing the traditional Filipino welcome song for us as we came into the building. It was quite a surprise. Here is the group of gospel outreach workers. We have 18 in this particular area, doing an excellent job, scattered far and wide across the northern part of Mindanao. The men sitting in the front, one on each side of Dave and I, were the local mission personnel. The one on the left side of the picture is the one in charge of the gospel outreach workers there. The one on the right-hand side is the conference or mission treasurer, and working also with our gospel outreach. We went out to visit one of their sites where they're working. I like to get out in the field and see what's actually happening. And they started to climb this, well, we drove 6 hours to get there. And when we got there, we needed to go up this hill. And I said, I think you better leave the car at the bottom, we'll hike up. And they said, no, we'll make it, 4-wheel drive. Well, they started up, and you can kind of see the tracks there on the road right in the center of the long road. You can see the tracks, how far they came. They went back down to the bottom and tried to come up the side road, which wasn't quite as good a road, but it was not quite as steep. But they still had problems with that. They eventually did get it up there, but it was a very difficult climb. At the top of that hill was this church that was being built. This is a typical design of a Seventh-day Adventist church in the Philippines. So when you see one that's shaped like this, you know it's a Seventh-day Adventist church. There was quite a fairly large group had gathered together there and are working here, are working in that area and worshiping. This is Larry Mata and his wife, the gospel outreach workers in that particular area. Larry has been very successful in raising up other churches. He's worked for Gospel Outreach for a number of years. We're in the same general area, another church organization. Now this one is a temporary building. And in fact, when they built it, they thought they had built it on property that the mission had purchased, only to find out that they were off. This wasn't their land. It was someone else's land. So they're planning to tear it down and build one on their own land. But what I'd like you to notice here is those pews. See the ones on the left there? They're stumps with a backrest nailed to them. How'd you like to sit on that for an hour and a half to 2 hours? Another area where a church is being raised up, these are the ladies, some of the ladies of the group. It was not a Sabbath, so during the week, the men were all out working in the mines. So this was another group that's been raised up. Another area, in the same general area, but a different church, these young ladies were singing us a special song for welcome. And every place we go, you know, in the Filipino culture, they want to feed you. So every place we go, they had food. So you don't dare eat very much because you know you're going to get some more at the next stop. So you just have to gauge yourself how much you can eat. In the central Philippines, we visited a church there, and this is our gospel outreach worker greeting one of the local members in front of an unfinished church. He's been working there now for about 3 or 4 years, and he has raised up quite a large group of people. He's been struggling trying to raise the money for a church, but it's nearly completed now. These are our workers on the island of Palawan. Now, if you remember back to the map, there was a long, narrow island coming down to the left. That's the island of Palawan. And we've had a good success there for many years. These people gathered with us here are the workers, the gospel outreach workers in Palawan. The lady in the center sitting between us, she and her husband Andy have been working for the gospel outreach for 22 years. Now, they only stay in one place for a maximum of 5, many times less than that. In that 22 years, Andy and Bernadette have raised up 9 churches, currently working on their 10th. And in each of those churches, he has built facilities, a church building that that looks nice. They're beautiful buildings. They're not just sheds. And the real test of how good a job our gospel outreach workers do is what happens after the gospel outreach worker leaves. And in each of these 9 churches that they have left behind are still flourishing. So Andy and Bernadette have done a good job of training the local people to be their own leaders, nurturing them in the doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they have done very well. Gospel outreach workers there in Palawan, we went to a church on Sabbath that one of our gospel outreach workers had raised up, but it was no longer working there. When we visited, we found the people were eager to have the visitors take charge. So on the spur of the moment, our gospel outreach workers stepped in, took the Sabbath school and the church service, and did a good job, I thought. Another group of Adventists been raised up by our gospel outreach workers. Some of the places where they're working are not really very safe. There are political unrest. And when they took us out to this one area, before we left, we got a police escort. So these 2 policemen escorted us out there so that if there would be any disturbance, you notice they have their AK-47s. We felt pretty safe traveling with them. We were riding in a double cab pickup. They were riding in the back of the pickup. I got to sit in the front seat. The man standing next to me there is the mission president in that area. A very, very cooperative and very hardworking man. On the same day, we visited this other church. This lady is a Tiboli tribe, and she has this particular headdress. This is the kind of headdress that many of the tribal ladies will wear. And she wanted me to take a picture of her little baby wearing this particular headdress. The baby wasn't too happy about it. You can see how beautiful these headdresses are. This little group, and this is the same area where these last two pictures came from, or the last picture anyway. The worker has been there only about a year, and they already have this group of people meeting every Sabbath morning. The lady on the left in front there with the green-blue shirt is the daughter of our gospel outreach worker, and she is there to help her father in leading out in the music and in working with the children. And you can see many of those present are children. The gospel outreach worker is the man sitting in the front with the yellow shirt. They're working hard to draw people to Jesus, to understand what Jesus has in store for them. As I said, some of the workers are in not very safe places. This is in the Muslim area. It's a predominantly Muslim state within the Philippines. The man on the left there is a Seventh-day Adventist. He is also the officer in charge of intelligence for the National Police Force. He showed us around the area, but he says, you stay inside the vehicle. Until we got to the police station, he said, this is the one place you can get out of the vehicle and stretch your legs. Otherwise, said, you stay inside. You know, they see a white face, they think they see money. So they kept us inside. But he is helping our gospel outreach workers in that if there is any uprising that he knows is coming up, he can give them warning so they can get away. Sioux-lads. I mentioned to you about the Sioux-lads. I'll tell you a bit later. Anyway, Sioux-lads is a student missionary program at Mountain View College. It was started back in the 1970s and had died by 1990, about the early 1990s, for lack of funding. In 1994, through a series of providences, it has been restarted and has now grown to where they have over 100 workers spread out over the whole island of Mindanao, teaching people about Jesus, primarily among two classes of people. The tribes in the mountains that are uneducated and Muslims. We're meeting here at this point on a compound that is being built by PAMAS, that's Philippine Adventist Medical Aviation Services. They have 2 airplanes, 2 helicopters, actually 1 helicopter in service, the other one is sitting in a container ready to be shipped at this point, waiting for the money to ship it. But they work together, they use their helicopter to take our missionaries out into areas where it may take them 1 to 2 days to hike. In 30 minutes they can be there with a helicopter. So they're very useful to gospel outreach, but they are also used as air ambulances for the local people. And they have saved many lives and make life much nicer. So gospel outreach tries to implement the Great Gospel Commission, as found in Matthew 28, 19, and 20, which says, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world." Jesus wants us to come and live with Him for eternity. He will provide anything we might desire. Clothes, food, great rest, complete peace of mind, and the presence of Jesus eternally. I plan to be there. I plan to spend eternity with Jesus, and I hope you do too. Let us all work towards becoming like Him, developing the character of Christ so that we can spend eternity with Jesus.